The member for Maribyrnong.
My question is to the Treasurer. I refer to 9-year-old Angus, whose family were left to transport him around the family farm in a wheelbarrow because the National Disability Insurance Scheme could not approve and provide him with a wheelchair for 12 months. Isn't Angus just one victim of the government's $4.6 billion underspend on the National Disability Insurance Scheme?
The Treasurer has the call.
Mr Speaker, the member for Maribyrnong would be aware that in 2017-18 there was $4 billion spent on the NDIS. The member for Maribyrnong would be aware that in 2018-19 $8.5 billion was spent on the NDIS. The member for Maribyrnong would be aware excuse me. The member for Maribyrnong would be aware that everybody who has an approved program within the NDIS is fully funded by this government, Mr Speaker. And the member for Maribyrnong would be aware that there are now 300,000 people in the NDIS, over 100,000 of whom are getting support for the first time, Mr Speaker. 115,000 people came on to the NDIS in the last year alone. Now, the member for Maribyrnong would also be aware, as a former leader of the opposition, just like the member for Rankin would know when he was learning at the feet of Chairman Swan, Mr Speaker, that the NDIS is a demand-driven program, Mr Speaker, just like hospitals are, Mr Speaker, and as I announced in April of this year, an extra $1.9 billion for hospital funding because of the demand. Just like the PBS, Mr Speaker, and in the numbers that were announced today, an extra $700 million for the PBS because it's a demand-driven program. But what is an inconvenient truth for the Labor Party is that in their last budget they had underspends of $500 million for carers and $400 million for veterans, Mr Speaker. In their last MyEFO, they had underspends of $1.5 billion for schools and $1.5 billion for hospitals, Mr Speaker. The reality is the NDIS funding has more than doubled on our watch, Mr Speaker. It's rolling out to nearly 500,000 people, and everyone who has an approved plan will get fully funded by this government.